March 14th, 1943, 280 miles west of Iceland, North Atlantic Ocean. The ping echoes through U-Boat 523's pressure hull like the tolling of a church bell, metallic, resonant, inescapable. Kapitän Lieutenant Werner Hasselbach freezes at the periscope, his knuckles white against the cold steel. Around him in the cramped control room, 23 men stop breathing. They all know what that sound means. They've been found. ASDIC contact, whispers Oberleutnant Klaus Reinhardt, the boat's executive officer, though everyone aboard already knows. His voice is steady, but his eyes betray him. Wide, dark, the pupils dilated with the primitive fear of being hunted in the deep. Single ping, bearing 040, range, estimating 800 meters. 800 meters, close, too close. The British destroyer has them painted, tracked, marked for death. In the old days, 1940, 1941, the golden years when U-boats ruled the Atlantic like wolves among sheep, 800 meters would have been survivable. Hasselbach could have gone deep, changed course, used the thermal layers to break contact. German submarines were ghosts then, invisible predators that sent Allied convoys to the bottom while their hunters flailed uselessly with primitive detection equipment. But this is 1943, and everything has changed. Another ping. Sharper now, more focused. The British sonar operator has refined his contact, narrowed the search cone. Hasselbach can almost see the man in his mind, sitting in the destroyer's cramped ASDIC compartment, headphones clamped over his ears, fingers dancing across dials and controls as he tracks the German submarine with equipment that would have seemed like science fiction 2 years ago. Diving officer, take us to 150 meters. All ahead slow. Rig for silent running. Hasselbach's orders are whispered, though he knows it makes no difference. The ASDIC can hear them regardless of how quiet they are. Sound travels beautifully through water, betraying every movement, every vibration, every heartbeat. Right full rudder, come to course 270. The U-boat tilts nose down, descending into the crushing darkness of the North Atlantic. At 100 meters, the pressure hull creaks, a sound like bones breaking, like the ocean reminding them how fragile they are. The air inside the boat is already stale, thick with the smell of unwashed men, diesel fuel, and fear. They've been submerged for 14 hours, hunting a convoy that intelligence promised would be lightly defended. That intelligence was wrong. Ping, ping, ping. The ASDIC pulses come faster now, each one a hammer blow against Hasselbach's composure. The British destroyer knows exactly where they are. More than that, it knows where they're going. The new ASDIC sets can track bearing and range simultaneously, can predict a submarine's course and speed, can guide the hunting vessel directly over top of its prey. Contact is closing, Reinhardt reports, his voice tight. 600 meters, speed 15 knots. He's coming right for us, Herr Kalu. 15 knots. The destroyer is racing toward them at attack speed, its bow cutting through the swells, its crew preparing the weapons that have killed so many U-boats in recent months. Hasselbach has heard the stories from the few boats that survived encounters with the new British anti-submarine weapons. Stories told in the cramped quarters of Lorient and Saint-Nazaire in voices made quiet by trauma. Stories about weapons that don't miss. Hydrophone operator, what do you hear? Hasselbach asks, though he already knows the answer. Single destroyer, Herr Kalu, twin screws, high revolutions, type C-class, possibly HMS Chesterfield or Cavalier. The hydrophone operator, a boy named Ernst, barely 19, recruited from a fishing village on the Baltic, presses his headphones tighter against his ears. Wait, I'm hearing something else. Mechanical sounds. Metallic, like loading mechanisms. Hedgehog. Hasselbach doesn't say the word aloud, but it fills his mind like poison. The Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar, 24 projectiles fired in a circular pattern ahead of the attacking ship, each one containing 35 pounds of Torpex explosive, each one fitted with a contact fuse that detonates only on impact with a submarine's hull. Unlike depth charges that explode at preset depths and can be evaded, Hedgehog projectiles are fire-and-forget killers. They fall through the water in silence, invisible to hydrophones, undetectable until the moment they strike. And they're accurate. Terrifyingly accurate. The British have refined the system to the point where a well-trained crew can drop a pattern of Hedgehog bombs within a 10-meter radius of a submarine's position. At 150 meters depth, U-523 is well within the weapon's maximum range. 400 meters, Reinhardt updates. His hand is shaking as he marks the position on the plotting table. Herr Kalu, we need to go deeper. Emergency dive to 200 meters. No. Hasselback's voice cuts through the suggestion. At 200 meters, we're at crush depth. One Hedgehog hit, and the pressure will do the rest. We stay at 150 and try to evade. It's a death sentence either way, and everyone in the control room knows it. Stay shallow and risk the Hedgehog. Go deep and risk the ocean itself, crushing them like an eggshell. There are no good choices left, only degrees of dying. The pinging stops. For 3 seconds, there's absolute silence in U-523. The crew holds its collective breath, hoping against hope that they've somehow evaded, that the British have lost contact, that this nightmare will end. Then comes the sound they've been dreading, the metallic thunk, thunk, thunk of Hedgehog mortars firing. 24 times in rapid succession, the launcher hurls its deadly projectiles into the air, arcing them forward of the destroyer's bow, ahead of where the submarine is moving. Hedgehog launch, Ernst screams into his microphone, ripping off his headphones as the sound overloads his sensitive equipment. Multiple launches, bearing 045. Hard left rudder, all ahead flank. Hasselback abandons silent running. Stealth is meaningless now, only speed and luck might save them. Emergency dive, take us down. The electric motors scream to life, pushing the U-boat through the water at its maximum submerged speed of 7 knots. Pathetically slow compared to the destroyer above, but it's all they have. The diving planes tilt, forcing the bow down, sending the submarine into a steep descent. The crew grabs for handholds as the deck tilts 30 degrees. Tools clatter. Men slide against bulkheads. In the torpedo room, one of the reload weapons breaks free from its moorings and crashes against the pressure hull with a sound like thunder. The first Hedgehog bomb enters the water 300 meters ahead of the U-boat's predicted position. It's a sleek cylinder, fins stabilizing its descent, nose fitted with a contact fuse so sensitive it will detonate if a fish swims into it. The bomb falls at 16 feet per second, arrowing through the dark water like a spear thrown by an angry god. Behind it, 23 more follow. Inside U-523, the men can hear nothing but the roar of their own motors, the creak of the hull, the hammering of their hearts. Hasselbach stands at the periscope station, hands braced against the overhead pipes, watching his crew. These men, boys most of them, joined the Kriegsmarine believing the U-boat service was Germany's shield and sword against Britain. They believed the propaganda about the aces, the tonnage wars, the Knights' Crosses, and oak leaves awarded to submariners who sent 100,000 tons of Allied shipping to the bottom. None of them believed they would die like this, hunted, helpless, waiting in darkness for death to find them. The first Hedgehog bomb misses by 20 meters. So does the second. The third and fourth strike the ocean floor 40 meters below the submarine, too deep to matter. But the fifth bomb, falling through a slight current that pushes it 3 degrees off its calculated trajectory, strikes U-523 directly amidships, just aft of the control room. 35 pounds of Torpex explosive detonates on contact. The explosion is not loud. There's no dramatic thunderclap, no Hollywood boom. Instead, it's a sharp, flat crack that seems to come from inside the bones of every man aboard. The pressure hull, built to withstand the crushing weight of the ocean, ruptures like tissue paper under the focused violence of the blast. A hole 3 feet wide opens in the starboard side, and the Atlantic Ocean, compressed by 150 meters of depth, comes screaming in. The water enters at pressure equivalent to 65 pounds per square inch. It doesn't flow. It explodes inward like a solid thing, a battering ram of liquid force that kills the first man it touches by simply crushing his chest cavity. Matrosengefreiter Hans Schmidt, 20 years old, from Hamburg, engaged to a girl named Greta, dies without making a sound, his body hurled against the far bulkhead by the hydraulic shock. The control room floods in seconds. Hasselbach has time to grab the overhead pipes, time to suck in one last breath before the water reaches his face. Around him, men are screaming, thrashing, drowning in the darkness. The emergency lighting flickers and dies, plunging everything into absolute blackness, broken only by the beam of a single waterproof torch that someone managed to activate. In that beam, Hasselbach sees Reinhardt, his executive officer, his friend, clawing toward the forward bulkhead, trying to reach the watertight door that might save the men in the bow compartment. The younger officer's face is locked in a rictus of effort, lungs burning, movements already slowing as hypothermia sets in. The North Atlantic is barely above freezing. Reinhardt almost makes it. The sixth Hedgehog bomb strikes the U-boat's stern, detonating against the engine room. The explosion shears through the pressure hull, through the diesel engines, through the electric motors that were screaming seconds before. It kills the engineering crew instantly. 8 men vaporized or crushed or drowned before they can process what's happening. More critically, it breaks U-523's back. The submarine's hull, designed to function as a single integrated structure, fractures along a stress line near the stern torpedo tube. The aft section, suddenly free of the bow's weight and buoyancy, begins to fall. The forward section, its ballast tanks still intact, begins to rise. The U-boat is tearing itself apart. Hasselbach feels the control room tilt violently. He's underwater now, in complete darkness, his lungs screaming for air that doesn't exist. His hands find a pipe, grip it, hold on as the world inverts. Somewhere in the chaos, he hears metal screaming, the sound of the pressure hull failing catastrophically, of rivets popping like gunshots, of welds tearing under stresses they were never designed to endure. In the forward torpedo room, 6 men are still alive, trapped in an air pocket as the bow section rises toward the surface. They can hear the ocean roaring around them, can feel the hull buckling, can smell the acrid stench of seawater mixing with battery acid from the ruptured storage cells. Chlorine gas, deadly, invisible, is already forming. Maschinenmat Otto Becker, the senior man in the compartment, tries to organize an escape. They have Tauchretter escape apparatus, emergency breathing devices, designed for exactly this situation. But they're at 140 meters depth, rising fast, but still deep enough that the pressure differential will kill anyone who tries to swim for the surface. We wait, Becker gasps, his voice distorted by the thin air and rising carbon dioxide levels. We wait until we're shallow enough, then we go. Understand? We wait. They wait. The bow section rises, propelled by its own buoyancy and the weight of the flooding stern dragging it upward. 90 meters, 70 meters, 50. At 40 meters depth, the pressure hull finally fails completely. The remaining air pocket compresses explosively, and the 6 men in the torpedo room die from barotrauma. Their lungs rupturing, their blood boiling, their brains hemorrhaging from the sudden pressure change. On the surface, HMS Chesterfield circles the kill zone, her sonar pinging continuously, searching for any sign of survival. Commander James Whitfield stands on the destroyer's bridge wing, watching the patch of ocean where his Hedgehog barrage struck home. He's a veteran of 3 years of Atlantic convoy duty, has killed 4 U-boats and damaged a dozen more. He knows what success looks like. Sonar contact lost, sir, reports the ASDIC operator over the voice tube. Multiple breaking up noises at bearing 270, depth approximately 100 meters and falling. Assessment, submarine destroyed. Whitfield nods, but doesn't feel triumphant. He's seen too much death for triumph. He knows what's happening below the surface. Men drowning, men crushed, men dying in darkness and terror. German men, yes, the enemy, but men nonetheless. He'll write the report, claim the kill, accept the congratulations, but he won't celebrate. Mark the position, he orders. Reduce speed to 5 knots. Maintain sonar watch for 30 minutes, then rejoin the convoy. And someone get me a damage assessment on our Hedgehog launcher. I want to know if we have enough rounds left for another engagement.
Because there will be another engagement. The Atlantic is full of U-boats, and the hunting has only begun.
300 meters below HMS Chesterfield, Werner Hasselbach dies with his eyes open, staring into darkness absolute. His last thought is of home, of Bremen, of his wife Anna, of his daughter Ilse, who will turn 4 years old next month and will never remember her father's face. He dies quickly, at least. The ocean is merciful that way. Drowning in freezing water brings unconsciousness in less than 2 minutes. The 43 other men of U-boat 523 die with him. Some quickly, some slowly, some crushed by pressure, some drowned, some poisoned by chlorine gas. None of them reach the surface alive. None of them will have graves. The Atlantic Ocean swallows them whole, adding 44 more names to a list that grows longer every day. By nightfall, U-523's wreckage rests on the ocean floor, 280 miles west of Iceland, in water so deep no human will ever see it again. The boat's Iron Cross pennant, awarded for sinking 3 Allied merchant ships during her first patrol, drifts slowly in the current, caught on a piece of twisted metal. Eventually, it will rot away, dissolving into the same darkness that claimed the men who served beneath it. In Lorient, France, at the U-boat headquarters, Capitaine sur Sea Hans Rudolf Rosing stares at the operations board and marks another submarine as overdue. U-523, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Werner Hasselbach, failed to report at scheduled intervals, presumed lost. 44 men, another hole in the already tattered fabric of the U-boat fleet. "That's 6 boats this week," his chief of staff observes quietly. 6 boats, and we've sunk, what, 3 merchants? Maybe 4? Rosing doesn't answer. The numbers speak for themselves. In 1940 and 1941, the U-boats were unstoppable. Convoys burned across the Atlantic. Churchill himself said the only thing that truly frightened him was the submarine menace. German U-boats sent millions of tons of Allied shipping to the bottom, strangled Britain's supply lines, came within inches of winning the war in the Atlantic through sheer attrition. But 1943 is different. The Allies have new weapons, new tactics, new technology. Centimetric radar that can detect a submarine's periscope in darkness and fog. Improved sonar that tracks boats with terrifying accuracy. Long-range patrol aircraft equipped with depth charges and rockets. Escort carriers that bring air power to the mid-Atlantic gap where U-boats once hunted unopposed. And Hedgehog, the weapon that doesn't miss. "We need to change tactics," Rosing says finally. "New approach patterns, deeper operating depths, better coordination between boats." But even as he speaks, he knows it's futile. Technology has shifted the balance. The U-boat is becoming obsolete, transformed from hunter to hunted, from predator to prey. The golden age of the U-boat service is over. What remains is only dying. April 8th, 1943. Western Approaches Command Headquarters, Liverpool, England. Admiral Sir Max Horton studies the wall-sized map of the North Atlantic with the focused intensity of a chess master analyzing an endgame. Colored pins mark convoy routes, U-boat sightings, and attack locations. Red pins, German submarines, have been multiplying for 3 years, spreading across the shipping lanes like a cancer. But in recent weeks, something has changed. The red pins are disappearing faster than they can be replaced. 17 confirmed kills in March, reports Commander Peter Gretton, one of Horton's senior escort group commanders. He's just returned from a brutal convoy battle, dark circles under his eyes, uniform still smelling of salt spray and cordite. Another 9 probables. We're destroying U-boats faster than donuts can build them. Horton nods, but his weathered face shows no satisfaction. He's fought submarines since the First World War, commanded them himself in his younger days. He knows the sea doesn't care about statistics. Every red pin that disappears represents 40-odd German sailors drowning in darkness. Every blue pin, Allied merchant ship, represents hundreds of tons of desperately needed supplies and the men who transported them. "What's our loss ratio?" Horton asks. 3 merchants for every U-boat kill, sir, down from 12 to 1 last year. If we maintain this rate through summer, we'll have broken the back of the U-boat campaign by autumn. 3 to 1. Still terrible. Still men dying, ships burning, oil slicks spreading across gray water. But it's progress. After 3 years of being hunted, the Royal Navy is finally hunting back. And it's all because of technology. Horton moves to a side table where various pieces of equipment are displayed like artifacts in a museum. First, an ASDIC transducer, the underwater sonar device that sends out pulses of sound and listens for echoes. The British have been using ASDIC since the 1920s, but the early versions were primitive, short range, inaccurate, easily fooled by thermal layers and ocean currents. This version is different. Type 144 ASDIC, Horton explains, lifting the heavy device. Range, 3,000 yards in good conditions. Can track bearing and range simultaneously. The operator can literally watch a submarine move on his display, predict its course, guide the attack vessel directly over top. He sets it down gently, almost reverently. 2 years ago, finding a submerged U-boat was like finding a needle in a haystack. Now we paint them like targets at a rifle range. Next to the ASDIC sits the reason those targets die. A Hedgehog projectile, one of 24 fired in each salvo. Horton picks it up. Surprisingly light, about 30 pounds, roughly cylindrical with stabilizing fins. Contact fuse, he points to the nose. Detonates only on impact with a solid object. Unlike depth charges that explode at preset depths and give the U-boat a chance to evade, these fall silently until they hit. The submarine's crew doesn't hear them coming. No warning, just sudden, catastrophic hull breach at whatever depth they're hiding. His voice is clinical, professional, but there's an edge of something else beneath it. Respect, pity. The Germans call it the devil's weapon. They're not wrong. Gretton steps forward, traces a finger across the Hedgehog's fins. I was skeptical when they first fitted them to my corvettes. Seemed like witchcraft. Fire a spread of bombs 300 yards ahead of your ship and hope one hits. But the mathematics work. The ASDIC gives you position and track. The launcher calculates the lead angle. Fire the salvo, maintain your course and speed, and the bombs fall in a pattern that covers the submarine's probable location. He pauses, remembering. On my last convoy, HMS Sunflower killed a Type 7 with a single Hedgehog attack. 1 salvo, 2 hits. The boat never surfaced. 44 men gone in maybe 30 seconds. How many rounds to achieve a kill? Horton asks. Average is 18 Hedgehog bombs per U-boat destroyed. Some boats die to a single hit. Others take 3 or 4 before the hull fails completely. Depends on where they strike. Hit the pressure hull amidships, and it's instant death. Hit the bow or stern, and the boat might survive long enough for the crew to try escaping. Gretton's jaw tightens. Not that escape helps much. We've recovered exactly 0 survivors from Hedgehog kills. The depth is usually too great, the water too cold, the damage too severe. 0 survivors. The words hang in the air like an indictment. Horton moves to the final piece of equipment on the table, a rectangular black box with dials and a small cathode ray screen. Centimetric radar, type 271, range 10 miles against a surfaced U-boat, 2 miles against a periscope. Works in fog, darkness, rain, conditions that used to make submarines effectively invisible. He taps the screen. The Germans don't even know we have this. Their U-boats still surface to recharge batteries, assuming darkness protects them. Then our destroyers appear out of nowhere, guided by radar they can't detect, and cut them to pieces with gunfire. What about their countermeasures? Gretton asks. Intelligence reports they're developing radar detectors. They are, too late. Horton's voice is flat. By the time they deploy effective detectors and modify their tactics, we'll have killed half their operational fleet. The Atlantic U-boat campaign is a technological race, and we're 3 steps ahead. ASDIC finds them when they're submerged. Radar finds them when they surface. Hedgehog kills them regardless. The Germans are fighting 1943's war with 1940's equipment. But Horton knows better than to be complacent. The Kriegsmarine isn't stupid. They're already adapting, developing new technologies, new tactics. Intelligence reports mention schnorkel devices that let U-boats run diesel engines while submerged, acoustic torpedoes that home on a ship's propeller noise, Type 21 electroboats with revolutionary underwater performance. The war isn't over, not yet. But for the first time since 1939, the Royal Navy is winning. April 22nd, 1943. U-boat U-191, 400 miles southwest of Ireland. Korvettenkapitän Erich Hoffmann lowers the periscope and tries to control the tremor in his hands. He's 31 years old, veteran of 14 patrols, holder of the Iron Cross First Class. He sent 6 Allied ships to the bottom, 2 tankers, 3 freighters, 1 corvette that got too close during a night surface action. He survived depth charge attacks, air raids, mechanical failures, storms that nearly capsized his boat. But he's never encountered anything like this. ASDIC contact is constant, reports his hydrophone operator, a veteran named Weber, whose nerves are usually steady as granite. Now Weber's voice cracks slightly. The British destroyer has been tracking us for 3 hours. Every time we change course, they adjust. Every time we change depth, they adjust. It's like they can see through the water. 3 hours. Most ASDIC contacts break after 20 or 30 minutes as the submarine evades, uses thermal layers to hide, or simply outlasts the hunter's patience. But this British destroyer, Hoffman thinks it might be HMS Hesperus, one of the Western Approaches Command's crack submarine killers, isn't giving up. More terrifying, it's not losing contact. U-191 is a Type 9C boat, larger than the standard Type 7, with longer range and heavier armament. But none of that matters when you're being hunted. Size just makes you easier to detect. Range is meaningless when you can't surface to recharge batteries. Armament is useless against an enemy you can't see or target. Depth, Hoffman asks.
180 meters, Herr Kalu. We're at maximum safe depth. Hull is creaking. Any deeper and...
The ping of ASDIC cuts through the hull like a knife. It's closer now, more focused. The British are refining their targeting solution, narrowing the cone of uncertainty, preparing for the kill. Hoffman has read the intelligence reports about Hedgehog. Every U-boat commander has. The weapon sounds impossible, mortar bombs that fall silently through the water and detonate on contact. But 4 boats have been lost in the last month to exactly this kind of sustained ASDIC contact, followed by sudden catastrophic failure. No survivors, no wreckage, just boats that stop transmitting and never return to port.
All stop, Hoffman orders. Absolute silence. Shut down everything non-essential. No movement.
The order passes through the boat in whispers. Electric motors stop. Ventilation fans cease. Men freeze in place, hardly daring to breathe. U-191 becomes a steel coffin drifting in the depths, using only minimal trim adjustments to maintain depth.
Playing dead.
It's a last resort tactic, and Hoffman knows it rarely works against modern ASDIC. The British sonar is too sensitive, can detect even passive targets, but it's all he has left. They've been submerged for 19 hours. Battery power is at 20%. The air is foul with carbon dioxide. Men are showing signs of oxygen deprivation, headaches, nausea, confusion. If they don't surface soon, they'll die regardless of what the British do. The ASDIC pings continue, but they're sweeping now, searching. The British destroyer has lost precision contact. Hoffman allows himself a moment of hope. Maybe the tactic worked. Maybe they're just another piece of ocean debris on the ASDIC operator's screen. Maybe... The pinging stops. Hoffman's blood turns to ice. He knows what comes next. Every U-boat commander who survived a Hedgehog attack describes the same sequence. Sustained ASDIC contact, followed by sudden silence as the attacking ship takes its final bearing and prepares to fire. Herr Kalu. Weber starts to say something, but Hoffman cuts him off. All ahead flank. Emergency surface. Blow all ballast tanks. It's a desperate gamble. Surface now, and they'll be exposed to gunfire, ramming, conventional depth charges, but staying submerged means waiting for Hedgehog bombs they can't hear and can't evade. At least on the surface, they can fight, can man the deck gun, can try to damage the destroyer before it kills them. The ballast tanks roar as compressed air forces water out. U-191's bow tilts upward at a steep angle. Men grab for handholds as the submarine races toward the surface, electric motors screaming at emergency power, every system pushed past its design limits.
They're at 150 meters when the Hedgehog salvo launches.
On HMS Hesperus, Commander Donald McIntyre watches the ASDIC display with the cold focus of a surgeon making an incision. He's killed 3 U-boats in the last 6 months, has perfected the art of Hedgehog attack until it's almost mechanical. Track the submarine, calculate its course and depth, lead the target, fire. Hedgehog ready, sir, reports the weapons officer. Fire. The launcher thunks 24 times in rapid succession, hurling its deadly projectiles in a circular pattern ahead of the destroyer's bow. Each bomb arcs through the air, plunges into the water, begins its silent descent. They're spread over a 10-meter radius, calculated to cover the submarine's probable position, even accounting for evasive maneuvers. McIntyre doesn't feel triumph or satisfaction. He feels only grim professional competence. This is mathematics, physics, the application of technology to solve the problem of killing submarines efficiently. Personal feelings have no place in it. The bombs fall through the water at 16 feet per second. U-191 is rising to meet them. At 70 meters depth, the first Hedgehog bomb passes 3 meters to port of the submarine's hull, close enough that the crew can hear it falling, a faint whistle of displaced water. It continues down, missing, eventually hitting the ocean floor and failing to detonate because the contact fuse found nothing solid. The second bomb strikes U-191's conning tower as the submarine rises through 60 meters. The explosion is catastrophic. 35 pounds of Torpex detonates against the reinforced steel structure that houses the periscopes, radar detector, and bridge access. The conning tower disintegrates, torn away from the pressure hull in a shower of metal fragments. Water floods into the control room through the breach, a high-pressure jet that kills 2 men instantly and knocks Hoffman against the periscope, housing hard enough to crack ribs. The submarine's bow continues rising, but now it's uncontrolled. The rudder and dive planes are ineffective with the control room flooding. U-191 breaches the surface like a wounded whale, 45 degrees nose up. Stern still deep, water pouring from the shattered conning tower.
Surface! Everyone topside! Hoffman screams through the chaos of alarms and rushing water. Abandon ship! Get out! Get out! Get out!
Men scramble through the narrow hatch, climbing over each other in panic, emerging onto the tilted deck into cold sunlight and the roar of wind and waves. Some grab life preservers. Most don't have time. They just run, trying to get clear before the boat goes down and takes them with it. HMS Hesperus is already closing, her 4-inch deck guns traversing to target the stricken submarine. McIntyre has ordered his gunners to fire on the hull, not the men in the water. The Royal Navy doesn't murder swimmers, but the submarine must be destroyed. The first shell strikes U-191 at the waterline, punching through the pressure hull and exploding inside the forward torpedo room. The detonation sympathetically triggers 2 of the loaded torpedoes. The resulting blast tears the bow completely off the submarine. U-191's stern section, suddenly free of the bow's buoyancy and weight, tilts vertical and slides beneath the surface. Men are still climbing out of the aft hatches as it goes down. Their screams are brief. Hoffman makes it into the water. He's wearing a life vest, which is fortunate because his broken ribs make swimming agonizing. Around him, perhaps 20 of his crew are thrashing in the freezing Atlantic, crying for help, trying to stay afloat in 3-meter swells. HMS Hesperus approaches slowly, cautiously. McIntyre knows about U-boats rigged with demolition charges, about desperate submariners with pistols who might take shots at rescue parties. But these Germans look finished, exhausted, injured, frozen, beaten. "Prepare rescue nets," McIntyre orders. "Bring them aboard, carefully." The destroyer's crew throws lines and nets over the side. British sailors, some of whom lost friends to U-boat torpedoes, reach down to pull German sailors from the water. There's no hatred in their faces, just professional competence and perhaps pity. These Germans are the enemy, yes, but they're also sailors who fought and lost, and the sea makes brothers of all men who challenge it. Hoffman is the last man pulled aboard, half-conscious from hypothermia and pain. As British medics wrap him in blankets and inject morphine, he watches the spot where U-191 disappeared. His boat, his command, his crew, 23 men who didn't make it out, who are sinking into darkness even now, trapped in steel compartments that will be their coffins. "How?" he manages to ask through chattering teeth. "How did you track us so perfectly?" A young British lieutenant supervising the rescue considers not answering, but there's something in the German commander's eyes, not defiance, just exhausted curiosity, the question of a professional wanting to understand how he was beaten. "Type 144 Aztec," the lieutenant says, "tracks bearing and range simultaneously. Once we had you painted, we never lost contact. Your evasion tactics might have worked in 1940, but this is 1943. The technology has changed." Hoffman closes his eyes. Technology. Of course. The Germans thought they had technological superiority. The Type 7 and Type 9 U-boats, the acoustic torpedoes, the experienced crews. But while they were perfecting old technology, the British were inventing new technology. And in war, new beats old every time. He'll spend the rest of the war in a POW camp in Canada, listening to reports of more and more U-boats lost, more and more crews killed. The kill ratio will continue tilting against Germany. By May 1943, Dönitz will temporarily withdraw all Atlantic U-boats, admitting defeat in a campaign that once nearly won the war. 21 men from U-191 survive the sinking, 23 die. Hoffman will carry their names for the rest of his life, the way all submarine commanders carry their dead, as weight, as responsibility, as the price of waging war beneath the sea. May 24th, 1943. U-Boat Command Headquarters, Berlin. Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz stares at the casualty reports with the expression of a man watching his life's work burn. The numbers are catastrophic. In May alone, 41 U-boats lost, 360 officers and men killed. Not captured, killed. The British and Americans are destroying submarines faster than German shipyards can replace them. And the tonnage? The merchant shipping sunk that was supposed to strangle Britain's supply lines. Barely 50,000 tons in May. In 1942, a good month saw 300,000 tons sent to the bottom. It's the Hedgehog, his chief of staff says quietly, and the improved Aztec. Our boats are being tracked with precision we can't counter. The old tactics don't work anymore. Diving deep doesn't help. Changing course doesn't help. Silent running doesn't help. They find us anyway and drop those damned bombs and our boats just disappear. Dönitz knows. He's read every after-action report from boats lucky enough to survive encounters with Hedgehog-equipped destroyers. The weapon is exactly what his worst nightmares predicted, a fire-and-forget submarine killer that requires no skill to evade because evasion is impossible. You can't outrun bombs falling through water. You can't hide from Aztec that tracks you regardless of depth or course. You can only hope the bombs miss, and increasingly, they don't. What about countermeasures? Dönitz asks, though he already knows the answer. The Schnorkel program is 6 months from deployment. The Type 21 electroboat is a year away at minimum. Acoustic torpedoes are in testing, but unreliable. We have nothing that addresses the core problem. Our submarines are too slow underwater, too easy to detect, too vulnerable to modern anti-submarine weapons. The Chief of Staff hesitates. Herr Gross Admiral, we're losing this war. The Atlantic campaign is finished. Finished. The word feels like a death sentence. Dönitz has dedicated his entire career to submarine warfare, has built the U-boat fleet from nothing into Germany's most effective naval weapon. And now technology, British technology, American technology, has rendered it obsolete. Withdraw all boats from the North Atlantic, Dönitz orders, his voice hollow. Redeploy to areas with less concentrated anti-submarine coverage. The Mediterranean, the Caribbean, Norway. We'll continue operations where the odds aren't completely impossible. And if the Führer demands we maintain pressure on the Atlantic convoys, then we'll lose every boat we have and accomplish nothing. Dönitz's hands clench into fists. The Battle of the Atlantic is over. We lost. Not because our men weren't brave or skilled, not because our tactics were wrong. We lost because the enemy's technology surpassed ours and we couldn't adapt fast enough. It's the truth, bitter as poison. The U-boat war that nearly won Germany the war in 1941 has become a death sentence for every crew that puts to sea in 1943, and it will only get worse. The Allies are producing escort carriers, long-range patrol aircraft, more destroyers, more Hedgehog launchers. By 1944, the ocean will be so densely patrolled that submarine operations become almost suicidal. But the war will continue. Boats will sail. Men will die. Because that's what war demands. Sacrifice long after victory becomes impossible. Death long after the outcome is decided. Dönitz signs the withdrawal order with a hand that shakes slightly. 743 U-boats will be lost before the war ends. 30,000 submariners will die, a casualty rate of 75%, the highest of any military service in any nation during World War II. They'll hear one ping, then silence, then nothing ever again. June 12, 1943, U-boat U-338, Bay of Biscay. The darkness should protect them. Oberleutnant zur See. Manfred Kinzel has crossed the Bay of Biscay 17 times, 8 outbound patrols, 8 returns, and now this 19th crossing that should bring U-338 back to the concrete submarine pens at Lorient. They always transit at night, on the surface, using darkness as their shield, while the diesel engines drink fuel and recharge the batteries that keep them alive when submerged. The darkness has always been enough, until tonight. Radar detector! The watch officer's voice cracks through the intercom from the bridge, high-pitched with sudden terror. Strong signal, bearing 090, range unknown. Kinzel is moving before his conscious mind processes the words, hauling himself up the ladder to the bridge with the speed born of 3 years of submarine warfare. He emerges into wind and spray, the Atlantic rollers heaving beneath U-338's hull, and immediately sees what has his watch officer paralyzed with fear. Light. A brilliant white searchlight stabbing down from the sky, perhaps 2 kilometers distant, playing across the wave tops. As Kinzel watches, frozen, the light sweeps left, then right, searching, hunting. Behind the searchlight, barely visible against the cloud-obscured stars, is the dark shape of a 4-engine aircraft, a British Liberator long-range patrol bomber fitted with the new radar that can detect a surfaced U-boat from 15 miles away. The radar detector screaming in Kinzel's ear is German technology, the Mitox receiver that's supposed to warn U-boats when British radar is painting them. But the warning comes too late. The Liberator already has them located. The searchlight is just confirming what the radar found. Crash dive, clear the bridge. Kinzel is already dropping down the hatch, his boots clanging on the ladder rungs. Above him, the watch crew scrambles to follow, 4 men trying to squeeze through a narrow opening while an aircraft closes at 200 kilometers per hour. Alarm! Dive, dive, dive! The klaxon shrieks. Men throughout the boat react with trained precision, securing hatches, flooding ballast tanks, angling the dive planes. U-338's bow tilts downward. Water surges over the deck, reaches the conning tower, begins pulling the submarine beneath the surface. Too slow. Everything happens too slow. The last watch officer is halfway through the hatch when the Liberator's searchlight finds them, pinning U-338 in a circle of light bright as noon. Kinzel can see the aircraft clearly now, massive, menacing, bomb bay doors already open. The watch officer freezes in the hatch, paralyzed like a deer in headlights. Move! Kinzel screams, grabbing the man's jacket and hauling him down into the boat. The hatch slams shut. The wheel spins, dogging it tight. Take us down. Emergency dive. 100 meters. The depth charges fall. From the Liberator's bomb bay, 4 Mark 8 depth charges tumble into the night, each one a drum containing 300 pounds of Torpex explosive, fitted with a hydrostatic fuse set to detonate at 25 meters depth. They're not the precision weapons that Hedgehog represents, but they don't need to be. Against a U-boat caught on the surface, still diving, moving slowly and predictably, they're devastatingly effective. U-338 is at 15 meters depth when the first depth charge detonates. The explosion isn't close enough to rupture the hull, but it doesn't need to be. The shockwave hammers through the water like the fist of an angry god, striking the submarine's port side with enough force to throw men off their feet. Light bulbs shatter, pipes crack. In the forward torpedo room, one of the reload torpedoes breaks free from its cradle and crashes against the hull with a sound like a bomb going off. Kinzel picks himself up from the deck, ears ringing, tasting blood where he's bitten his tongue. Around him in the control room, men are shouting damage reports, but he can barely hear them over the high-pitched whine filling his head. The second depth charge detonates closer, then the third, the fourth. Each explosion is a hammer blow that shakes U-338 like a terrier shaking a rat. Cork insulation rains from the overhead. The depth gauge needle jumps wildly. Someone is screaming. Kinzel can see his mouth open, see the terror in his eyes, but can't hear the sound over the roaring in his ears. Damage report! Kinzel has to scream to hear his own voice. All compartments report! The reports come in fragments. Flooding in the aft torpedo room. Electrical fire in the motor room. Hull breach near frame 58. The submarine is dying, torn apart by explosions that don't even need to hit directly to kill. But U-338 is a Type 7C, the workhorse of the U-boat fleet, tough and redundant and built to take punishment. The hull holds. The watertight doors contain the flooding. Damage control parties attack the fires with extinguishers and wet blankets. Slowly, desperately, the boat stabilizes. Depth? Kinzel asks. 80 meters, Herr Kalu. Descending. Trim is difficult with the flooding aft, but we can maintain depth control. Level off at 100 meters, all ahead slow. Come to course 220. Silent running. They creep through the darkness like a wounded animal seeking its den. The Liberator circles above, its radar searching, but underwater, the U-boat is invisible to the aircraft's sensors. As long as they stay submerged, they're safe from air attack. But they can't stay submerged forever. The damage assessment takes 2 hours. The aft torpedo room is flooded but sealed off. 2 men trapped inside when the watertight door was closed, drowned before anyone could save them. The electrical fire damaged the battery compartment, destroying 6 cells and contaminating the air with battery acid fumes. The hull breach near frame 58 is minor, slowly leaking, but manageable as long as they don't go too deep. Most critical, they're down to 40% battery power, and the diesel engines won't start. Something in the air intake system was damaged by the depth charges. Without the ability to surface and run the diesels, they can't recharge batteries. And without batteries, the electric motors will die, leaving them powerless and blind at the bottom of the Bay of Biscay. How long? Kinzel asks the engineering officer, a grizzled veteran named Schneider, who's kept U-338 running through impossible circumstances. On batteries alone? Maybe 18 hours if we run minimal systems. Less if we need to maneuver. Schneider's face is grim. But Herr Kalu, we need to surface soon regardless. The air is getting foul. Carbon dioxide is at dangerous levels. We have maybe 6 hours before the crew starts passing out. 6 hours. They're 200 kilometers from Lorient, traveling at 4 knots submerged. Even if they could maintain that speed, which they can't with damaged systems and dying batteries, it would take 50 hours to reach port. The mathematics of death are inescapable. Can we fix the diesel intake? Kinzel asks, though he already knows the answer. Not from inside the boat. Someone would need to go topside, access the external valves, clear whatever debris is blocking the system. 10 minutes of work, maybe 15. Schneider pauses. But we'd have to surface, in daylight, in the Bay of Biscay, which the RAF patrols constantly. Surface in daylight, in waters where British aircraft circle like sharks, fitted with radar that can detect a U-boat from beyond visual range, armed with depth charges and rockets and bombs. It's suicide. But staying submerged is also suicide, just slower. Kinzel makes the decision that every U-boat commander dreads. We surface at dawn, minimal time on deck, get the intake cleared and get back down. Post extra lookouts. The moment anyone sees or hears an aircraft, we crash dive and hope we're fast enough. The crew receives the order in silence. They know the odds, but they also know the alternative is suffocating in darkness as the air turns to poison and the batteries die. At least on the surface, they have a chance. Dawn comes too quickly. Kinzel watches the depth gauge as they rise from 100 meters, moving slowly to avoid creating a wake that aircraft radar might detect. 50 meters, 25 meters, periscope depth. He raises the scope, does a quick 360 scan. Empty ocean, gray sky, rolling swells. No aircraft visible, but that means nothing. The liberators can see U-boats from beyond the horizon. Surface, Kinzel orders. U-338 breaches into the gray morning, water pouring from her deck as the ballast tanks blow. Immediately, the bridge watch scrambles topside with binoculars, scanning every quadrant of sky. Schneider and 2 mechanics emerge through the deck hatch, running toward the damaged air intake with tools and spare parts. Kinzel stands on the bridge, binoculars pressed to his eyes, sweeping the horizon again and again. Every second on the surface is a risk. Every minute increases the chance that some British radar operator will see a blip on his screen and scramble an aircraft. Contact! One of the lookouts points to the south. Aircraft, bearing 180, range, maybe 10 kilometers. Kinzel swings his binoculars around. There, just a speck against the clouds, but growing larger. A Sunderland flying boat, 4 engines, bristling with depth charges and machine guns. Schneider, how much longer? 5 minutes, we need 5 minutes. They don't have 5 minutes. The Sunderland has already altered course, turning toward U-338. The British crew has seen the submarine, or their radar has painted it, or both. The aircraft is accelerating, dropping altitude, preparing for an attack run. Man the flak guns. Prepare to engage. The 20mm anti-aircraft guns on U-338's conning tower swivel toward the approaching aircraft. 2 gunners, both teenagers, both looking terrified, strap themselves in and chamber rounds. The guns are woefully inadequate against a 4-engine bomber, but they're all U-338 has. The Sunderland comes in low and fast, barely 50 meters above the wave tops. Kinzel can see the bomb bay doors opening, can see the depth charges ready to drop. The range closes to 2 kilometers, 1 kilometer. Fire! Fire! The 20mm guns open up, their distinctive thump-thump-thump rhythm hammering across the water. Tracers reach out toward the Sunderland, a stream of glowing rounds that looks impossibly slow. Most miss. A few strike the aircraft's fuselage, punching holes in aluminum skin, but doing no critical damage. The Sunderland's nose gunner returns fire. .303 caliber bullets rake U-338's conning tower, sparking off steel, forcing the lookouts to duck for cover. One round catches a gunner in the shoulder, spinning him away from his weapon. He screams, clutching the wound, blood pouring between his fingers. Schneider, now, we dive now. Almost done. 30 seconds. The Sunderland roars overhead, so close Kinzel can see the pilot's face in the cockpit. The depth charges fall, 4 of them tumbling end over end, striking the water in a line that will bracket the submarine. Clear the deck, crash dive. Schneider and his mechanics drop their tools and run for the hatch. The wounded gunner is hauled below by his partner. Kinzel takes one last look at the falling depth charges, maybe 15 seconds until impact, and drops through the bridge hatch, dogging it shut behind him as he falls.
Dive! Take her down! Emergency dive!
U-338's bow tilts sharply. The ballast tanks flood with a roar like waterfalls. The depth gauge needle swings clockwise as the submarine descends. Not fast enough. The depth charges are set for 25 meters. U-338 is at 18 meters when they detonate. All 4 explode nearly simultaneously, creating a hammer blow of overpressure that feels like the end of the world. The submarine lurches sideways, thrown by the shockwave like a toy. Kinzel is slammed against the periscope housing hard enough to crack ribs. The lights go out. Emergency lighting flickers on, casting everything in hellish red. And then the screaming starts. Hull breach! Hull breach! In the control room! Water is pouring in through a crack in the pressure hull. Not a catastrophic rupture, but a steady jet of freezing seawater spraying at high pressure. Men scramble to seal it with wooden wedges and rubber matting, working frantically as the water level rises around their ankles. Fire in the forward battery compartment. Chlorine gas. The most feared words on any submarine. Seawater mixing with battery acid creates chlorine gas. Invisible, deadly, capable of killing a crew in minutes. Already Kinzel can smell it, a sharp chemical scent that burns his nostrils. Seal the battery compartment. Emergency ventilation. But the ventilation system is damaged, running at half capacity. The gas will spread slowly through the boat, poisoning the air, forcing them to surface or die. The mathematics have changed again. Now, they're not just running out of battery power and air. They're running out of time before the chlorine gas kills them. Surface, Kinzel orders, his voice hoarse. We surface, and we stay surfaced. Make best speed for Lorient on the diesels. Rig for air attack. Man all anti-aircraft positions. He pauses, looking at his crew, young men and boys, most of them, exhausted and terrified and injured. We run on the surface in daylight, and we fight any aircraft that comes at us. It's the only chance we have. It's not much of a chance. Running on the surface in the Bay of Biscay in daylight is how most U-boats die. Caught by aircraft that can see them from miles away, attacked by depth charges and rockets they can't evade. But staying submerged means dying to chlorine gas or battery failure. Both options are terrible. Kinzel chooses the one that at least offers the possibility of fighting back. U-338 surfaces into full daylight. The damaged diesel engines cough to life, belching black smoke that will be visible for kilometers. The submarine makes 12 knots on the surface, fast for a U-boat, but pathetically slow compared to the aircraft hunting them. They make it 40 kilometers before the next attack. This time, it's a Wellington bomber appearing out of cloud cover at 3,000 meters altitude. The aircraft circles once, assessing the target, then dives for the attack run. Kinzel's gunners open fire at extreme range, tracers reaching up toward the bomber but falling short. The Wellington pilot, flying into a stream of anti-aircraft fire from a desperate U-boat crew, presses his attack. His bomb aimer releases 4 depth charges at 500 meters range. 3 miss. 1 strikes the water 10 meters from U-338's port beam. The explosion lifts the submarine bodily, slamming it sideways through the water. Men are thrown from their gun positions. The wounded gunner from earlier, still on deck despite his injury, is knocked overboard by the blast. He vanishes into the wake, his scream lost in the roar of engines and gunfire. Kinzel doesn't order anyone to try rescuing him. They can't stop. Stopping means dying. The Wellington circles for another attack, but U-338's anti-aircraft fire has damaged its port engine. The bomber streams smoke, loses altitude, turns away toward its base in England. The U-boat crew cheers weakly, but Kinzel knows it's a hollow victory. More aircraft will come. They always do. They make another 30 kilometers before the radar detector screams again. This time, it's a Catalina flying boat approaching from the west. And behind it, barely visible on the horizon, Kinzel can see 2 more aircraft, a Liberator and another Wellington. 3 aircraft. U-338 has perhaps 20 rounds left for the flak guns, and half the crew is too exhausted or injured to fight effectively. The diesels are overheating, running far beyond their design limits, trailing smoke that marks their position like a beacon. Kinzel does the mental calculation. They're still 160 kilometers from Lorient. At current speed, that's 13 more hours. 13 hours running on the surface, under constant air attack, with failing equipment and a dying crew. They won't make it. "Prepare to abandon ship," Kinzel says quietly to his executive officer. "Get the life rafts ready. When the aircraft make their final attack run and we can't fight anymore, we surface and we abandon. Maybe the British will pick up survivors. Maybe not. But I won't order the crew to die fighting when the outcome is inevitable." The executive officer nods, his face gray with exhaustion and despair. But before the aircraft can attack, salvation arrives from an unexpected source. On the horizon, moving at high speed, Kinzel spots 3 shapes, German destroyers, part of the Lorient escort force sent out to protect returning U-boats through the deadly Bay of Biscay. The destroyers' anti-aircraft guns open up with a fury that makes U-338's small flak guns look like toys. The sky fills with bursting shells. The Catalina turns away immediately, climbing for altitude. The Liberator releases its depth charges early, well short of the target, and flees north. The Wellington doesn't even approach, recognizing the impossible odds. 2 hours later, U-338 limps into Lorient harbor, escorted by the destroyers, her deck awash, her hull cracked in a dozen places, her crew reduced to 38 men from the 46 who departed on patrol. And then Kinzel stands on the conning tower as they approach the massive concrete submarine pens, fortified structures built to protect U-boats from Allied bombing. Other boats are there, damaged like his, returning from patrols that have become death sentences. The men on the pier are silent. There's no celebration, no cheering, just grim acknowledgement that another boat survived when so many don't. The after-action report goes to U-boat headquarters in Berlin, adding to the mounting evidence that the Battle of the Atlantic is lost. U-338 sank no ships on her patrol. She was detected and attacked 6 times, twice by destroyers using Hedgehog and Aztec, 4 times by aircraft using radar and depth charges. She survived through luck and desperation, but barely. Kinzel's recommendation is stark. Recommends suspension of Bay of Biscay transit operations. Allied air coverage is continuous. Radar detection makes surface transit suicidal. Current U-boat technology cannot counter these threats. Casualties are unsustainable. The recommendation is ignored. The war continues. Boats continue sailing, and most of them don't come back. August 15th, 1943. Western approaches Command Headquarters, Liverpool. Admiral Horton updates the wall map with the latest kill markings. In the 3 months since May, Allied forces have destroyed 79 U-boats. 79. The entire operational U-boat fleet numbered only about 400 boats, and they're losing 25 to 30 per month. The Germans are adapting, reports Commander Gretton, pointing to intelligence summaries. They're fitting acoustic torpedoes that home on propeller noise. They're developing snorkel systems that let them run diesels while submerged. Some boats are fighting back on the surface instead of diving, using concentrated flak fire to drive off aircraft. And it won't matter, Horton responds. They're fighting yesterday's war with tomorrow's weapons. We're already developing countermeasures to acoustic torpedoes. Our next generation Aztec will track even snorkel-equipped boats. And U-boats that fight on the surface? They're target practice for our bomber crews. He's right. The technological race is over, and Germany lost. The U-boats that terrorized Allied shipping in 1940 and 1941 have become hunted prey in 1943. The predators are now the victims, stalked by destroyers with Hedgehog launchers, by aircraft with centimetric radar, by a web of technology they can't counter. What's the current kill ratio? Horton asks. 8 U-boats destroyed for every Allied merchant ship sunk, and falling. By the end of 1943, we estimate we'll be killing 15 U-boats per merchant lost. 15 to 1. a complete reversal from the dark days of 1940 when U-boats sank 15 ships for every submarine lost. The Battle of the Atlantic isn't just won, it's won decisively, overwhelmingly, with a technological superiority that reduces the once fearsome U-boat fleet to barely an annoyance. But Horton knows better than to celebrate. Every red pin he removes from the map represents 40-odd German sailors who drowned in darkness, who died hearing one ping and then nothing. They're the enemy, yes. They sank Allied ships, killed Allied sailors, but they're also men who served their country, followed orders, and died in steel coffins at the bottom of the ocean. "Gentlemen," Horton says to his assembled staff, "we've won this battle through technological superiority and the bravery of our crews, but let's not forget what we've learned. In modern warfare, technology can shift the balance in months. We were losing in 1942, we're winning in 1943. The nation that continues innovating, that stays ahead in the technological race, will win the next war. Remember that." The lesson will be remembered. The technology developed to kill U-boats, sonar, radar, guided weapons, operations research, signals intelligence, will form the foundation of modern naval warfare. The Battle of the Atlantic will become a case study in how technology, properly applied, can overcome even the most skilled and determined enemy. May 8, 1945. Kriegsmarine Headquarters, Flensburg, Germany. Gross Admiral Dönitz, now serving as Germany's head of state following Hitler's suicide, signs the order disbanding the U-boat fleet. The war is over. Germany has surrendered. Of the 1,162 U-boats commissioned during the war, 785 were lost. Of approximately 40,000 men who served in the U-boat force, 28,000 died, a casualty rate of 70%. 70%. No other military service in any nation, in any war, suffered casualties so severe. The U-boat crews fought with skill and courage and determination. They sank 2,779 Allied merchant ships and 175 Allied warships. They came within a whisper of winning the Battle of the Atlantic and starving Britain into surrender. But they heard one ping, and then they knew they were already dead. The technology that killed them, Aztec and Hedgehog, radar and long-range patrol aircraft, signals intelligence and operations research, represented a revolution in warfare. The U-boats were hunting with 1940 technology in a 1943 war. They never stood a chance. In the decades after the war, submarine technology will evolve beyond recognition. Nuclear power, ballistic missiles, advanced sonar systems. But the fundamental lesson of the Battle of the Atlantic remains unchanged. In technological warfare, innovation determines survival. The side that stops innovating becomes prey. The German U-boat crews learned this lesson in the worst way possible. They heard the ping of advanced Aztec tracking them through the depths. They heard the thunk of Hedgehog mortars launching projectiles they couldn't evade. They heard the silence as bombs fell through water, invisible and unstoppable. And then they heard nothing at all, just darkness and pressure and the cold Atlantic closing over them forever.